The world's changing and structures are falling, and so I wanted to talk about the effects of rose essential oil on the subtle bodies, on the aura, and on the etheric field as a mode of managing our way through this turbulent time. So I just wanted to show you, I'll probably be in trouble for picking this last rose. This is a January grown rose from an English garden, pretty much unheard of, but it's a Lady of Shalott, and it's a David Austin rose. And even just holding her, I can feel a change in my etheric field. So let's start talking by what do I mean by etheric field? Well, the field that exists outside of the body, but also through the body. And so we would say the subtle body energies, so aura, chakras, also the meridians that move through the body, and this connection to spirit, but also to the wider collective consciousness. And I think that now we can say we've got kind of two connections to the wider consciousness. One is our aura, but then also the media, of course, is connection to consciousness. And if you're like me, the chances are you're seeing how things are playing out in the world and finding it very challenging. And of course, as it affects our nervous system, then it also permeates through into the subtle body energies. So the etheric field, you should know, is bi-directional. That means that it brings information in, but it also takes information out from your body. So essentially what we can say then is it will reflect what's happening in our nervous system, but also in our physical body, but also within our emotional world also. And so perhaps there's no more important oil to think about in this situation than rose. So rose, of course, is specific for grief and for trauma. And last weekend we watched some really horrible things play out in Minneapolis. We're seeing a lot of political unrest, of course, in the Middle East, in Russia, with Russia, Ukraine, all over the world. Everything, whenever you turn the telly on, is scary. And so rose is extremely good at calming down the nervous system, but specifically in the etheric field, it works on our emotional body and also our body of love. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4 etheric bodies 4 and 5. And then also for a lot of people, you're going to see issues with karma, of course. So thank you for all of the people that engaged with the conversation about karma in my first video about the aura, and saying, yeah, you've forgotten an aspect of karma that we all engage with, whether we're Christian or whatever denomination we are, and that is what you accrue by being good and what you lose by being bad. And I think that rose in particular really helps to smooth out that kind of balance sheet of how we conduct ourselves in the world with love. And if you are engaging with the political landscape, and to be honest, I'm not a political person, but I think it's impossible to ignore it right now, the chances are you're feeling like, where is the love to cite the great Black Eyed Peas? Where is the love? And so we can engage that using rose essential oil. And I want to be clear that I do mean rose essential oil rather than rose absolute. Rose absolute does have an effect on the emotional body. It's really good for the skin, but in terms of working with those higher realms of the etheric field, it's not as good. So if you can get a rose Otto essential oil, you'll find that the frequency feels much higher, much lighter, and able to lift you out of this low vibration that the media really wants to pull us down into. So rose, as I say, works on these particular etheric bodies, but also, of course, on our heart chakra and our sacral chakra. Now, I want to highlight, if any of you are really interested in what's going on in the actual energies of the planet, you might want to engage with a video or the channel of a lady called Nancy Valentine Smith, who I've become friends with, and she's really bringing nourishment to my life. Nancy describes herself as a medicine woman of the sun, moon and stars, and she has her own channel, and she's talking about how a lot of the turbulence on this planet is coming from the sacral chakra energies of people, but particularly of the planet, of this dissolving of the existing energies to do with the sacral chakra. So I will send you over to her to get her interpretation of that. But my own interpretation of that would be that we have the power struggle between male and female, and how that is starting to fall right now. And so if you feel that you are engaging with a slightly different paradigm, that you can feel the divine feminine energies coming through, actually Hildegard of Bingen would have had interesting things to say about that. Because if you look back at her work from the 12th century, she obviously talks a lot about medicinal plants, but she talks about how there is a divine female aspect to God, this creative energy, this viriditas. She called the energy caritas, and how caritas had a greening of the spirit, and how this beautiful caritas of beauty and feminine energy brings a completely different aspect to the spirit, a gentler aspect, a more healing aspect. So I really am engaging a lot with Hildegard's teachings about caritas to be able to help us through this time. So we're obviously talking about the different etheric fields. We're talking about the chakras, but we're also talking about the way that the meridians move through the body, and that's obviously a completely different set of teaching. That's Chinese teaching. Traditional Chinese medicine tells you that rose brings through a stability of Shen, and that it really supports the kidney meridian and the conception vessel. Now, the conception vessel is all to do with reproduction, so I'm going to leave that because you can work that out from other videos. But the kidney meridian is often to do with fear. And so how rose works on the kidney meridian is it helps to smooth the Shen and helps to stabilize fear. In other words, not give fear an opportunity to take hold. And of course, when that happens, we know now that as soon as the body goes into a fear situation, the amygdala says to the hypothalamus, release CRF1, so cortisol releasing factor 1, into the system. And when it does that, the body becomes completely flushed with cortisol. Now, Rose has a really interesting relationship with cortisol. We know that it is able to stabilize the release of cortisol, to stop it flooding the body, and to reduce the effects of cortisol, specifically on belly fat, actually. So that's really interesting. Another interesting relationship with cortisol that you might like to think about is babies. So when babies are born, I don't know if you know that they don't have a normal, what we would call average way of creating cortisol. So the average way of creating cortisol, not everybody does. So for example, people with Asperger's don't do this, but normal people have a spike after about 30 minutes into the day, and then cortisol drops through the rest of the day. And so that is why most people depend on caffeine in the morning, because they need to have that kind of jolt before even the natural flow comes in. But babies don't have that. What happens with babies is they mimic the cortisol responses of their mothers till they're about 2 years old. And so this is another reason why rose is such an important aspect of postnatal medicine. That not only is it actually helping to reduce the what's the word I'm trying to say, shrink the uterus back to size, and helping to balance the hormones, but it also helps to soothe down the etheric field so that baby remains calm. So one of the most effective things that you can do for somebody who's just had a baby is to give them some rose essential oil to really help that, because as we know, the more baby cries, the more stressed mum gets. And so obviously if we go into a situation where mum's secreting loads of cortisol, baby will start creating more cortisol. And then there's so much sort of evidence into the effects of adverse childhood experiences starting from that. So keep mum calm, keep the etheric field calm, soothe the etheric field. And how we do that is to actually bring up the emotional body so it feels calmer. Don't forget, obviously, if we're talking about hormonal issues, the rose will also engage with the first etheric body, which is the blueprint of the physical body. So we'll see like more hormonal balance in the first etheric body. Then the second etheric body is body of will. So it doesn't necessarily have that strong effect unless one is exerting a pressure on the world of a loving pressure. In other words, if you are doing like consciously doing love meditations, peace meditations, and please at this time of the world, please be doing that. So then you will see rose permeating into the second etheric body, slightly into the third, but in the fourth, this is the emotional body, and so we see real stability there. So a very different framework to somebody who has postnatal depression, for example, or who is really struggling with a lot of stress. We'll see a much calmer template there. But then the next body is the body of love. And so working with rose essential oil can really help to permeate this body with love. And think about, right, this is what I want you to think about. At the moment, we're thinking about the effects on the etheric body from the inside out. But if you are walking down the road and you come in quite close proximity with somebody in the street, or in our place, you always have to queue for the post office. So when you're queuing for the post office, people are inevitably within your etheric field. And if your etheric field is broadcasting the energy of rose, which is essentially it will, if you are consciously meditating with rose, using it in your aura spray. If you don't know how to make an aura spray, there's a video. Working with it in candles. If you don't know how to make an essential oil candle, here's the video. But always pushing rose out through your etheric bodies to become a broadcast of love. What I also want to talk about is the following etheric body is the body of karma. And for somebody who has grown up in a family of witches, and who clearly must come from a lineage of priestesses, My nervous system is definitely thinking persecution right now. If you do not fit the existing model of Christianity as it should be seen in the world today, and you're not white, I mean, you might think I'm talking about America, but it's just as strong here in the UK at the moment. We go to the beautiful town of Shrewsbury and we've got all these flags up saying, you know, we don't want immigrants here anymore. We make Britain great again. It's, you know, it's happening right across the world. And so any kind of situation where the collective consciousness starts to go our way or the highway, then what will often happen is you'll see in the outermost regions of the aura that there is like old ancestral memory of going, I really feel like I might be in danger. This could easily turn on me. And so Rose is very good at going, but hold it, do not shrink, because this is something that I really found was useful in COVID. When we had our social distancing, I had a real sense of my etheric bodies being able to go, oh yes, I can spread. I can be myself because I don't have to worry about anybody else. Nobody else can see me. And the energy spread. When you're frightened, when you feel threatened, of course, what you do is you bring it in, right? You try to make yourself small. What is really interesting to do, and bear in mind that I am one of these people, is to compare the effects when you're dowsing the etheric bodies and looking at the etheric field. You can actually measure it. So you can use a ruler and say, okay, how far out is that today? And over a period of doing several treatments and several readings with somebody, you can see how the etheric field grows, shrinks. Somebody who's been in a domestic violence situation for a long time will not have a large etheric body. They will have a very, very small etheric field because, you know, they're consciously aware. And likewise, the etheric field becomes supercharged. And so thinking about these children with issues with cortisol, slightly changing it a bit because I'm not implying that this applies to women who've got postnatal depression per se, but if a child has been in a situation where there is turbulence in the household, then their etheric field becomes supercharged to be an antenna all of the time. So while you might see quite a lot of teaching about the aura being the biofield, I think the biofield is only half of the conversation, because when we're measuring the biofield, we're measuring electromagnetic activity, we're measuring the effects that cells have generated as they've worked and left like a residue behind and left this electromagnetic field around them. But that doesn't speak to the part of spirit. That doesn't speak to kind of speaks to the effects of our energetic field, as in I am stressed, so that's going to leave me an imprint. I am afraid, that's going to leave an imprint. But what it doesn't speak to is my parents are afraid, so how have I picked that up? Or like I said about, there is like an ancestral memory for me that the priestesses were closed, you know, the sanctuaries were closed and the priestesses were disbanded. Somebody else's idea of Christianity had put an overview and said, well, the rest of you don't count, you don't exist. So if you are kind of feeling that sense in your body, that's not biofield, because that doesn't belong to you. That belongs to somebody a long time in the past. And that may or may not be construed as a past life, or it might be just like, that's historic fact, and I know that I belong to that lineage. So the aura and the etheric field become more than just the biofield. They become the collective consciousness and your kind of personal blueprint through all of your experiences and the experiences of those who have taught you, who are close to you, and who you have learned from, whether that be directly or indirectly. So Rose is very good at being able to say, okay, well, let's bring all of that together in love, and let's just hold it in a brave space. And a brave space would be, like for Rose, it would be a pacifist space. That is, I feel that I have the right to stand up for my own endeavours. There are other oils that would make you stand up and say, I am going to fight it. But Rose says, no, this is just me. Kind of a bit like the monks who are walking through America for peace. That's very much the effect of Rose on the etheric field. That we are peaceful, we are standing up, we are being brave. We're saying, I don't agree with what's going on, and just holding that space. And if we think about how that translates through different religions, we'll often have prayers for grace, prayers for bravery, quiet bravery in these times. And that is bravery to be me, bravery to stand up for what I believe in. Maybe we at a later date we are going to step in and start fighting. But Rose says, that's not really my field. My field just says, be peaceful in who you are. Be tranquil in who you are. And one of my favourite expressions about Rose was by the Emperor Jahangir, when he was actually arguing for his mother-in-law. Not many men argue for their mother-in-law, do they? But he was saying, somebody else had said, I invented rose essential oil. And he said, no, she did. She discovered it. She was making a beautiful rose water, and she noticed there was a scum on the side of the bowl, and she collected that up. And yeah, and he presented her with a beautiful string of pearls to say, wow, this is something really beautiful. And he'd said about it, it brings back withered souls. And for me, that is just the most beautiful description of what Rose does for the etheric field. If you feel that you're shrinking, if you feel that you are traumatized, if you feel like you kind of just want to hide your head, for me, it's making me want to turn off all social media. But if we do that, we become invisible. And that's what they want. So Rose's effect on the etheric field is to be peaceful, to be like the rosary. Peaceful, processing, beautiful, gentle, forgiving.